I used to use a Dungeon Master screen. Loved that it was chock full of handy tables and charts and information. GameMasters here, and as much as I liked having access to those bits of information, I found that the screen itself ended up kind of being more of a barrier between the players and myself. And that it almost became a free pass, if you will, for the players to kind of run amok. Using a DM screen is not inherently wrong. I'm not saying that. I mean, it is still full of fantastic information. But what I found at my table was that it was causing three key issues in our playstyle that were instantly eliminated when I stopped using this. The issues being barriers, distrust, and ultimately, by extension, a lack of player agency. I simply found that the DM screen itself created an actual physical barrier between myself and the player's engagement. It gave the players pause in actually talking to me, and then in turn, them getting fully immersed into the game itself. It kind of prevented that. It made them feel like they were outside of a house looking in through the windows. Part of my body language was hidden. They were not able to pick up on those physical cues, which kept them from getting excited and really kind of prevented them from being fully engaged in the story. Now, remember, one of the DM's tasks is to encourage the players to engage and get them excited about playing. If they can't see you, that's just putting up a small barrier. And I'll be honest too, me having a DM screen, having it up in front of me, gave me plenty of space to hide information. Not that that is exactly a negative by any means. What I'm referring to here is I need my own map for reference when the players are moving through a dungeon. They don't need to know where every trap or every piece of treasure is, but it did beg the question from the players, what else is the DM hiding? Was he removing a trap where one would have been just because the rogue and him are married? Was the Gorgon replaced with a skeleton? Is he fudging dice rolls? I mean, with a DM screen up, I can assure you, I never did swap anything or remove anything. And while admittingly, I may have occasionally fudged dice roll here and there, but we'll call that divine intervention. But the players could easily and legitimately ask that question of distrust and a lack of transparency. Now, before I jump into how the DM screen caused a lack of player agency, I first need to thank these awesome supporters, as their contributions to this channel have made it so that I didn't need to take on a sponsored ad for this video, and I truly cannot thank them enough. If you would like to support the channel by becoming a Patreon or YouTube member, I'll leave a link down in the description. You get my eternal thanks, and of course, I will add your name to this ever-growing list of awesome supporters. Ultimately, with the DM screens up, I found that the players were taking a lot of risks, and honestly, they were kind of playing a lot very carefree. One of them later flat out told me that they assumed that the outcome of their actions were all predetermined, and that their choices didn't really matter because they felt that I had already had all of my notes hidden from them, so it didn't matter what they did. And that made me feel horrible, like a really bad DM. And that when a goal was put out and that they would ultimately get to the end of that task and that it was all predetermined. Well, that is what ultimately made me stop using a DM screen altogether. And by not using that screen, all of my rolls were out in the open. They could now see when I rolled a 1 or a 20. They now saw that I wasn't hiding key information or playing favorites, that I wasn't magically removing a deadly trap or swapping one monster out for another. They saw that I wasn't fudging dice. Again, on rare occasion, I still do that. Again, divine intervention and all. But with that physical barrier down, they saw that there was nothing to distrust. But what mattered even more is that because they now saw that the dice were true to what I was rolling, suddenly their actions became more meaningful. They put thought into what to do next. The dice still determined the randomness of the situation, but they thought about what they were going to do next. And I found me physically standing more instead of sitting behind the DM screen. Now when I DM, I'm flailing my arms around, moving from side to side, and I found that I was a very animated game master. When a player ran across something that only they'd notice, I'd pull them into another room and describe to them what they saw. And I left it up to them as to if they want to describe it to the rest of the party. In other words, I do what I can to not sit down. Heck, I rarely even sit down when running a game now. And all of that has gotten the players engaged in the game, invested in the game, and overall having more fun, as am I. I stopped using the DM screen years upon years ago, which is why these older ones are still in such great shape, which kind of makes me wonder how much they'd sell for on eBay. That's a whole different story there. But that did add the challenge of how to conceal the DM's map when they explored a dungeon, or how to hide the monster stats without having the monster manual open in front of all the players to see. And I'll explain that trick in another video. So be sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button, but to definitely subscribe so that you don't miss that video. And keep in mind, however, I'm not saying that if you do use a Dungeon Master screen that you're doing the same things that I was in the past. I'm not saying that you're wrong for using one. You may be rolling in front of that DM screen, and there's nothing wrong with that. As mentioned, I found that when I ditched it, those three key issues, the barriers, the distrust, and the lack of player agency vanished within a couple of sessions. And I found myself more invigorated and animated when I ran the game. If a DM screen works for you, keep at it. I'm merely saying what changes I saw at my table with my players. In today's video, we also talked a bit about fudging dice and player agency, and those can be some very deep and hot topics in and of themselves, which is why I made this video and this video. So be sure to check them out next. With all of this, talk to me. What's been your experiences with using a DM screen or not using one? Let's have a good full-on conversation down in the comments. And until next our paths cross, may you sell your DM screen for a premium.